Welcome to episode 23, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction and build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. The shortest way to success is to learn from others who have been there and done that. I hope that you will head on over to iTunes and give Construction Dream Team a 5-star rating. All you have to do is look at the little purple icon on your iPhone, click it, and go search for Construction Dream Team. When you get there, scroll down just a little bit and you'll see ratings, and go down to the right side where all the little stars are. Click on that one and you've given us a 5-star rating. That really helps us to get higher in the search engines so that more people can find us. The higher we are, the more of Construction Nation will be able to come and join us. We really appreciate your help with that. So today, I am really excited to have John Thorrson here as our guest. We met, probably about 5 years ago now when he came to visit. John is in Sweden. So hello, John in Sweden.
Good evening, Sue. I must say from my end, good day your end, I guess.
Yes, it's good morning here.
Good morning.
We're so happy that you're here. John, when I met him, was the partnering director for the second largest construction firm in Sweden. And he has been on a journey since then to take partnering not only in NCC, but learning about partnering in other parts of the world. And so I thought it would be so exciting to have John come and share with us kind of his journey, but also some insights for all of us to learn what we might do to improve our projects and the way that we collaborate. So welcome to Construction Dream Team.
Thank you, Sue. Looking forward to this.
So tell us a little bit about your journey of being the partnering manager, and now you're the business manager at NCC in Sweden.
Right. Well, it all started about 20 years ago. So half a lifetime ago. I'm 39 today. Started out when I was about 21. Believe it or not, it started with a team building exercise that we did back at university. When you get one of those aha moments, I wouldn't have dreamt at that point that I was going to end up in the construction industry. I was studying German, majoring in the German language at the university. And we had this team building exercise like you did in the late 90s or early 2000s. You go out in the woods and you hang out for 2 days and you go through all different trials and you go back and nothing's ever changed. But it did change this day. We get to this exercise and we're in just between winter and spring. So the ground is all soggy and you're out there in the woods among the pine trees. And you get to this particular exercise that's got 3 different parts in it. One, you got to put some matches, 1 meter long matches in a specific pattern. One part is you got to lay a giant puzzle out on the ground. And the third part of the task is a box with pipes, 13 pipes that can only fit one way. So we divide the team up. We're 7 people, and we don't go 2-2-3. We go 3-3-1. And obviously, I got the box of pipes. And halfway through, the other 2 teams, or the other parts of the team, are done with their exercise. And they try and sort of help out with what I'm trying to do.
What?
But you know what it looks like from my perspective, Sue? They're just meddling. They're disturbing my zone, my bubble. They're inside my sphere. It's my task. I've got 5 minutes to go to solve this incredibly difficult task. They got the easy tasks, right? And it just frustration starts building. And I'm there, I'm twisting these pipes. I'm trying to force them down this little box. And they're trying their best. What if you take this pipe and put it on the short end, John? I've tried that. And it just builds. And I find myself in a very not so proud moment with my back towards the team, my arms across my chest, screaming so that it echoes among those pine tops. And I'm saying something in the line of, well, if you're so smart, then you go ahead and try it. And obviously they failed. They only had 4 minutes to go. afterwards we do, you know what you do, you get in a circle and you sort of reflect on the exercise. And the team was pretty happy. We'd solved 2 out of 3 tasks. And being a skilled team developer coach, the guy in charge, he just points to us and he says, well, what did you feel when John stepped outside of the team and shouted at you so it echoed among the pine tops? And you know what their response was, Sue?
No, what did they say to you?
They just said, oh, we don't mind. He's like that.
Oh my.
And that was a long story, sorry, but that just was like someone pulling up the curtain in the morning and this bright sun outside, and for the first time, I could actually see myself and my actions and my behaviors from someone else's perspective. Some might call it a late bloomer, but I thought I was always contributing with a lot of energy and ideas and thrust into any team. And now I got to see the backside. I'm not listening enough and being too quick to jump to conclusions or grabbing tasks and doing stuff. And that sort of started a journey where I went from away from studying language as such to going into social psychology and studying more the interaction with language and between people. And a few years later, I go up to this, I visit this company, which we'd had this team building session with, and asked if they had any position available, which they, for some reason, had. And I went on working there for a little over 3 years. And that's when I got in contact with the construction industry. They did team building, leadership development, and were in that spectra. And Skanska, I know you're familiar with them, right? Through the International Partnering Institute, for example, and they're quite big in the US in some areas. They came to us at this company and they said back in 2006, you guys, people, and we know how to build stuff. And if we put our minds together, maybe we can compete on this market. They've introduced something called partnering, where you're supposed to work together with people. And that was quite fun. So that's how I got into the construction industry. And at first glance, I couldn't understand why people were fighting each other. Architects, designers, and contractors, and engineers and contractors and subcontractors and clients. Why they weren't just working together? But then after a while, you get into it and you understand this lack of communication and lack of wanting to understand each other that just drives us apart. And then in 2010, I go into NCC. I moved to Stockholm. Didn't know what to do. And I just figured, why don't I just do what I always liked? I like doing partnering in the construction industry. And 100 people applied for one job. And they were only supposed to hire one person. And I was number 3 on the list. And they got an extra, they actually got to hire 2 people instead when they pleaded to upper management at that point. And they know they wanted number 1 or number 2 and number 3. They didn't want number 1 and 2. They actually put our team together, looking at our different profiles and trying to build a good team there. And that's how I got into partnering. Sort of like a wild card with a bachelor's degree in German.
But it really was kind of your mission. It sounds like more like it found you.
I had to, right?
Yes.
Imagine people going through life like the guy I'd been up to that point back in 2001 and not knowing what it could be like to actually work together with people and listening to people. And I wanted to give that back to other people, that sort of enlightenment, if you will. That's what triggered partnering for me.
That's awesome, because I really still see today, maybe even the majority of the project leaders are still the person yelling at the treetops and not fully embracing that they have a team there to help them, and that maybe everybody would be smarter if everybody listened to each other. So yeah, that's a good blessing in disguise in the long run. It's taken you on quite a trip. Yeah.
It's still doing it. And then
Yeah.
after 6 years at NCC and just mastering and partnering facilitation, I sort of felt the need to go out and actually do it for myself. And when I got an invitation to join one of our civil departments in Stockholm, or the civil department in Stockholm, then I jumped at it. Instead of just coaching others to work collaboratively, what about doing it for myself in the, we call it in the production line. as a business manager in charge of developing good projects in the early market.
So cool. So,
and I've been doing that for roughly 2 years now.
So we're going to talk more about that, but I want to jump in and ask you. So you've had these leadership roles, and you really have been at that highest level within these organizations. So what do you?
No, and not really highest level, but I've been high enough.
Pretty high. What do you think are your greatest strengths as a leader?
I've never really had the privilege or the easy way of having a leadership through mandate, or telling people what to do. I've always sort of had to develop a strategy where I could lead through influence rather than authority, if you like. And someone told me that once, that you're a good leader, John, because you're not a threat to anyone. And I don't really know what he meant, but I can sort of see what he means. I don't take the yelling approach. I sort of take the listening and often inspirational approach rather than the require and demand approach. I feel it works well.
Probably because you listen, they trust you. That's what I would take it as. It was interesting too that without authority, you gain authority by listening. It's an interesting kind of dichotomy.
Well, and also through trying in every situation to find, it's not always possible, but most of the time, when you find, have you ever heard this exercise called "What's the Pig"?
No.
It's just there's a picture. I just remember it from one of those trainings I did once. I underwent once. There's a picture of a pig, and around that pig is 10 different individuals, each with their own perspective of the pig. One is the butcher. He's interested in the pig from one point of view. One's the vet who's interested in the pig from another point of view. Another one's a child. And just looking at a task or looking at a project, every stakeholder has, well, even if, your own team, every stakeholder wants something of their own out of that project and out of the pig. And trying to make sure that the people involved get their share of the pig and what's important to them actually helps a lot to get people in sync with what you're wanting to do.
Yes, I'll never look at a pig different the same way now. Yeah. But that's a great example of how everyone does come to the same problem with a different perspective, and we all assume if it's our perspective, everyone else's is the same as ours, and it never is. So tell us a little bit.
There's a lot. We always use that approach when we do partnering facilitation, don't we? Right, trying to get clients and contractors to sort of work together towards the end game.
Exactly.
Making sure that everyone's needs are met.
So that's perfect for telling us a little bit more about partnering in Sweden. And what excites you most about partnering on projects?
It's, well, I never get tired of that feeling you get when you look into a room and you can't tell whether a person belongs to the client team or the contractor team or a subcontractor. They're just all working together to solve a project. I just love that feeling, and I can never get across that. I can never get over that. I want to help contribute to that every day that I wake up. It's basically that. It's not making more money to the company, or it's not that thing that motivates us. It's, at least for me, it's always been about getting people to work together in a more productive way than they would if they were all sitting in different ends of a building or just emailing each other.
Yes, I would agree 100%. So I know you're aware and have studied how partnering works in the United States and in Sweden. And so tell us a little bit about what's different in the way that partnering occurs in Sweden versus the United States.
Well, I was quite naive when I first went over to the States 5 years ago, doing that cardinal mistake of believing that partnering was the same thing because we called it the same thing. Ever make that mistake?
Oh, yeah.
Probably not today, but back in the days. So I sort of went over, and I know I met up with people at Caltrans and talked to them about your view on partnering? What's your how does it work with, for example, open books? Have you got open books on your projects, and are both sides open, or is it one-sided? Oh, it's always one-sided, he said. And I remember thinking, oh, so the contractor is open with all the costs in the project. Oh, no, no, no. We're open with all the budget that we've got. And we never know anything about the contractor financials. And that was a big, wow, aha for me, because in partnering and collaborative working as we know it through an integrated approach, I would say, as it evolved in Sweden from 2002 and onwards till today, has been pushed onto the market from a contractor perspective, not from the clients associations or from the government. And so we've always had to work a little bit uphill with clients and others in the market just being skeptical about whether or not this is just a new way for contractors to cheat them out of more money. So we've always tried to develop this approach where we work with one joint economy. There's just one economy for the project, where it needs to be transparent that we're making money and this is how much money we're making. And you can see every invoice in the project, where you work together as one team, where you've got a common organization working towards common goals. Your goals have got to be met, our goals have got to be met, and then you got the project goals that you got to work against.
And tell us about do you have a contract? What does that contract say, or what is it like?
We're quite spoiled in Sweden because we have, since forever, I would say. I don't know exactly when it started, but we've got two standard contracts in Sweden that I would say 90% or even more of all the contracting in Sweden is done based on these contracts. Between client and contractor, you got AB or ABT, two standardized contracts. One was last agreed in AB was 2004, ABT was last revised in 2006. And one is design build and the other is design bid build. And using that as a base, you go in and you try and change as little as possible on those rules of engagement, because everybody knows what they mean. And you just add this concept of open books and workshops, building the culture and trying to get people to work towards the same goals and getting in earlier in the process. And that's always been a bit tricky, but we want to get in earlier with the clients to add value and not just get in very late when it's time to start building, because it's often too late for us to have any real influence on the things that costs in a building or in a big project.
Absolutely. That we find the same thing. If you wait till construction, the effect you can have is minimal compared to the kind of effect you could have if you were starting either pre-design or certainly pre-construction. Yeah.
Yep.
So tell us too.
We've often found that just working on cost plus is the best way to take that question off the table, whether or not you're trying to make more money in the project than necessary, if you will. I want to just make, as a businessman, if I can make a good deal once and not have to try and reinvent a deal within the deal as the project runs along, then we can focus more on the project and less on the contract administration side. 90% of all the conflicts, or 80% at least, in our projects have had to do with financials and economy and whether or not something is eligible for a target cost raise or not. And if you can just get that off the table and work with a joint budget and be transparent with all the risks, be transparent with all the costs, and just agree that for running this project, if you recruit this company with these key individuals, with this partnering process, etc., then we want X% on the last row. If we can just get that, you've got your team and you can work with just focusing on what's best for the project. We've seen that so many times repeatedly, and still that's always the toughest question, whether or not we go on a cost plus basis or with a target cost or with a fixed cost. Or that's one of those success factors that I truly believe we can spread to the other communities. Just recruit your team and work with them, but pay them enough, but pay them once, and don't force them to try and be smart during the journey.
Yes, it sounds like progressive design build in the way that you bid the percentage, and then the team works together to manage the budget. Sounds somewhat similar to that.
It doesn't always need to be design build, though. It can also be with our standard contracts. It could just as easily be a client holding the pen, or being owning the design and having a consultative contractor on board. But sure, yeah.
So that's very interesting. So it could also happen in design bid build as well.
All right, good. Oh yeah, most definitely. On our side, it does.
Yeah.
Most common is the design build, though. But I had this strange situation happen once in a collaborative project with the Swedish Transport Administration, sort of like Caltrans. But this was for we were building a railway, and one of the environment specialists on the client said during one of our workshops that he loved this thing about collaboration and partnering, because he was allowed this was a design build. He was allowed into the contractor's design meetings, and he could see so many things that we were missing that he was going to look more thoroughly on when it came to his desk. Fortunately, we had a very good project manager on the client side who stood up and said, "Oh, what did you just say?" And he repeated what he just said, and so that was a wake-up call for everybody, and said, "That's not what we're here to do. That's not what collaboration is all about. It's about you contributing when you're in the room." And he had this understanding of our basic contract, saying it's either a design bid build or it's a design build. And if it's a design build, then the contract, I'm not allowed to tell the contractor what to do. So I have to be quiet and just correct all the mistakes that he makes. And we just clarified that about the rules of engagement, saying that the contractor is, of course, responsible for the design. Even if you come up with a good idea, they don't have to use it. They will evaluate it. And if they draw it into the drawings, then obviously that's on their own responsibility, on the contractor's responsibility. And it's just those moments that you see when you're actually helping develop the construction industry still.
And you probably are seeing the same thing I do, is it's the roles, people's roles, and their belief in what their roles are that often creates these friction points. And many times you don't even realize that where it's coming from. You think it's the issue, but it's not really the issue. It's what somebody believes is their role, and that's why they're having the friction. We see this all the time on projects, and you have to back in to see, no, it really is. Policing is going to create this kind of friction because you have expertise to share, to support. Yeah.
In partnering in the US, we're all about culture, right? You're all about culture. It's not so much about the contract, and it's not about the whether it's a design build or a cost plus or a fixed price. It's with whichever contract you've got, it's process of getting people to work together, right? If I've understood that correctly.
We sort of accept people for whatever they have, and then work to try to blend the team into one team, kind of despite maybe some of the barriers that the contract is creating. It's always great to have a contract that doesn't create the barriers, but yeah. So
that's what I'm trying to get, where I'm trying to get to, and what we're constantly preaching over here is just don't try and force people to collaborate on a fixed price. It's just going to get you it's not even going to get you halfway. If you can work with those open books and really build that trust on your team that's necessary, you'll be able to see so much more value you get out of that project. But we're not reaching everybody yet.
No, probably never reach everyone, but just the fact that it can be done begins to get people to listen and to try things. I know, I believe that the teams, if you give them the right tools, and you could have like from an owner's standpoint, you could have, this is our budget, we don't have any more money than this. And the role of the team is to manage to the budget. You figure out, you got to balance the cost, scope, and schedule. And that's the team's job. And so figuring that out is really what we empower them to do. And then they do a great job. I mean, they'll come up with ideas and things to do that. And, but if it's all about the cost and trying to make it fit something that you couldn't have known when you started, It's challenging for everyone. I mean, everyone. The owner's like, well, my goodness, that's not what we expected. The designers going, well, we've already designed it. Now we got to redesign it. And the contractor's going, well, we can't build it unless, so it's not good news for anybody.
Have you seen that as well? That you're working so hard with the team on the project and you're getting them exactly where you want to be. And as soon as you sort of have to step outside, say you don't manage the project scope 100%, you have to actually go back to your mother associations and get some sort of new approval or, rescope or whatever it may be that's not within your project boundaries, then that's where collaboration gets really difficult, or it gets difficult to work together because those people are not in the collaborative bubble. And all of a sudden you're getting told on your home team by your home teams to go in and do something that's sort of working against everything you've built during that partnering process.
Yes, we see that. And that's why a lot of times we'll do internal partnering to try to create the atmosphere and culture within the organization so that when the team that's highly collaborative comes to them, they at least understand what it is they're trying to achieve so they don't work against it. Otherwise, you just hit this big culture clash and it can be very challenging. So the more congruence you can have across all those organizations, the faster, better, smarter your teams are going to be too, and especially if you have a whole program of projects. It's worthwhile if you have a whole program of projects. So I know you've been really...
That was something I really took from the IPI, that I got from the IPI when I came over back those 5 years ago. That whole partnering program approach. We sort of had it at NCC, but we didn't really have it as clearly defined as the partnering program that I think it was a paper from 2010 or 2011, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think I wrote it in 2009 or something. Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. That really helped me to wrap my head around how we should organize and work internally to enhance and strengthen our own maturity for collaboration at NCC. It's and basically any other company or organization wanting to do the same.
Yeah. So I know you've worked also with what's happening with partnering in some other parts of the world too. So can you tell us a little bit about what's happening besides what's happening in Sweden and the US?
Well, believe it or not, even amongst the Nordic countries, partnering varies a lot. Back in '99, even Denmark started looking at our neighboring country here. Just started looking at partnering that came from the United Kingdom as we knew it back in '98, with the Latham report and then the Egan report, where they needed to rethink construction, and they all called that partnering. And partnering was the name of the day, and everyone wanted to do partnering. The government even said, if you want to use government funding, then you need to work partnering, which basically made partnering increase immensely in volumes. But after a while, the name got so, say, associated with, let's call this partnering and let's work like we've always worked. And so a lot of people really didn't believe it. So you can trust that you were actually getting a partnering approach. And that forced at least the UK and later even Denmark to change their approaches. Even though it was client driven, it was made mandatory to the market. So it went up like a sun and down like a pancake, as we say in Swedish. In the UK, they just stopped using the word partnering and they started calling it collaborative working. And in Denmark, they more or less abandoned the notion of partnering and they started focusing a little bit more on private-public partnerships and that type of financial solutions as well for projects, which really hasn't caught on very well in Sweden. But in the UK, at the same time, there was a drive towards maturing organizations so much more for partnering and doing it for real, collaborative working, as they call it. And whether it's towards client contractor or between contractors in joint ventures or consortia, or in your supply chain or internally between departments or companies within the group. And that resulted in a standard that came out in somewhere around 2011, the BS 11,000. I actually believe one of the departments, one of your public departments over there in the US, is referencing that standard, to believe it or not. But we started looking into that a few years ago, and that standard went on to form an ISO standard, and so now it's published in 2017 in March. It became ISO 44001, and ISO 44001 is getting traction not only in the UK, it's also got some traction down in Austria, but outside of the construction market, believe it or not. We've got a lot of traction down in Italy, which is a lot of small companies wanting to learn how to work together in clusters rather than huge corporates like NCC or Skanska or anyone else. We haven't seen that much traction in the rest of Europe. I would say partnering and collaborative working as such is most matured in Europe, in, I would say, Sweden and the UK. If you ask someone else in another country, they might say it otherwise. But the way I'm looking at it from my horizon, that's the way it's quite clear to me. And also that's where we've sort of been most active in developing this ISO standard, a management system for collaborative business relationships. Takes on a lot like ISO 9000 and ISO 14000. Follows the same pattern or the same higher level structure. And for the first time, I feel we're getting somewhere when it's like you've got with your IPI partnering program, and you're actually embedding it into the corporate structure, and so that it makes sense with aligning collaborative working with your business objectives and being able to identify where it will add value, to prepare for that and develop your own processes and your own people and build their skills, and then also to deliver on a good partnering or collaborative venture.
Yes,
I was going to study up a little bit more about.
Are you saying?
Oh yeah,
are you seeing this anywhere else in the world? It's happening. What about anything in Asia happening or?
We got a also not in the construction industry, but in Malaysia, the production industry were have been following this ISO 44001 and actually helped develop it so that it would be more also fit to the Asian market and fit the Asian terminology and way of working. Obviously, when you look into Hong Kong, they've got the British system to a large extent, and they're using everything that comes out of there, or trying at least to adopt, adapt, and improve it. I wish I could have studied up a little bit more on Hong Kong, but I'm not very updated there as of yet. But I know that collaborative working and partnering has a lot of firms, some firms that have set up collaborative working and coaching in the UK have also done it in Hong Kong. So that has really caught on. I know I read a study recently or a new article recently where they wanted to sort of restart their collaborative ambitions. But so I can't really tell how it's going over there now. But follow the English-speaking world, like go down to Australia and New Zealand, and they've got their alliancing models that have influenced quite a lot of the work partnering or the development of partnering in Finland, for example. Well, it is catching on in the other parts of the world, but most where we see it, it's about integrated approaches and trying to use different incentivized models and hoping that will solve everything. The contract will solve collaboration instead of building the culture. I think both Sweden and to a large extent the UK also has realized that culture is just like in the US, that culture will eat that contract for breakfast, more or less, right?
The contract can't overcome the culture. Yeah.
It can't. It will help, it will enable, or it will try and hinder, or it will put barriers in the way. But with the right culture, you can always overcome those barriers. I know that. I try and get people to put in as few barriers as possible so you can spend your energy moving forward and not climbing over obstacles along the way.
So that leads us.
It's hard enough to build.
That leads us to the next question. What do you see as some of the barriers that are to creating the strong teams that really create extraordinary results?
One of the major issues that I've found is that when we get a client to try out or to take an initiative for a partnering project, then too often it's just because one project leader has been very strong and advocating for that idea. So it hasn't really caught on with, often in the municipalities, hasn't caught on in the management or in with the politicians. Never the politicians, as far as I've seen so far. So we're trying to get partnering and collaborative initiatives to get higher up in the value chain, just like you always preach as well, right, Sue? It needs to start from the top. Otherwise, it's too risky once you enter into a collaborative venture, and people will change, especially in this market that we've got today. We have too much work with too few people, and people do change. And when you change some key personnel and it's not embedded in the organizational culture outside of the project, then you risk just having your mother organization just put a replacement in instead of recruiting a suitable replacement for the project. That is actually one of the main barriers that I do see. We can overcome most barriers, but that barrier, like contractual barriers, but that barrier is really, really difficult to overcome.
Yeah, whoever is the leading the project is setting that culture. And then as you roll up the chain of command, if they aren't supporting that person with a collaborative manner, it's pretty hard to maintain over.
We've also had this, I don't know if you have this in the US, but for a certain period in Sweden, during a certain period in time in Sweden, just a few years ago, we had more than a few clients just rename their procurements and call them partnering procurements, because otherwise they wouldn't get any contractor to bid because the market was super hot.
And what was it? What did they actually do though? Was it partnering?
No, they renamed the. They just put a. Is
this like you saw the pig differently?
The word partnering in. Yeah. They just dressed the clown up like a pig.
Okay.
And say, look at this pig. It's a clown. No.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't sound too effective.
And that is never a good reason.
Yeah.
So we sort of felt back in 2013 there was this big article. It got quite big. It spread some big noise in Sweden in our building industry magazine. It was, partnering is no success. Partnering is bad for business. They had asked 444 Finnish projects. It was office buildings and apartments, if I remember correctly. Well, accommodation, like what do you call that? Where like 100 people live in flats.
These are public ones, or
what do you call that?
Condominiums?
Oh, yeah, mostly condominiums, or building people houses.
Multi-family dwellings.
All right, so dwellings and office buildings. 444 finished projects of apartment buildings and office buildings. So that's what they had asked the site managers from the contractors and the project managers from the clients, and quite a high frequency of replies as well. And where they had ticked a box where it said, is this a collaborative project? Well, have you procured it like a collaborative project? Are you calling it a collaborative project? And they had ticked that box. Turned out the project managers and the site managers were less pleased with the construction climate, were less pleased with the time, with the money, basically everything. Even they were less pleased with the collaboration in the projects collated where they had ticked that box than with the projects that were run traditionally. And I remember this so well because the new partnering director of NCC Nordic had been at work for 10 minutes and we got this call from the magazine. So I had to make the statement instead of him. But we don't, at NCC, we couldn't really understand that picture or understand that view of collaborative projects because we weren't doing it like that. And we could have gone two ways. We could have either gone and said, we don't trust that study. That study wasn't well enough executed. They're comparing apples with pears. And just because you tick a box of collaboration doesn't mean that it's a real collaborative project and you're working with a good collaboration process or partnering process. But we chose to go the other way around and actually embrace and welcome the study because it did show to the whole market in Sweden that if you want to do collaborative working, if you want to do partnering, it's bloody hard. You don't do partnering unless you really need to and want to. If you can do something more simple in a real transaction, just a simple transactional approach, please, by all means, just do it. Don't add the complexity of collaboration. But if you want to go and collaborate, if you believe that you will get a better product, that your team will be more satisfied and you will, in the end, create more value, then you need to face up, you need to educate yourself, you need to educate your partners, you need to work together with your partners and get in. When you're learning to drive, at least in Sweden, you've got a gas pedal and a brake in the seat next to the driver as well. Have you got that in the US?
Yes. Yes, we do.
What do you call that? A double commando, or what do you call that?
Well, we call it student driver. So
all right. So you need to be up there in the front in a student driver's seat, and as a client and a contractor, you need to both be able to to press both pedals. You need to be involved. You can't just put the client in the back saying, "All right, enjoy the ride. We're going." It just sort of pointed that out towards our whole construction industry in Sweden. And the week after, there was a big reply from a lot of public clients and large contractors saying that this was we're not seeing that same picture as was put forward in this study. And that's when we started looking into if we could get even better with our processes and the way we train our people and the way we approach the market. And that's when we looked over into the latest developments in the UK and found this British standard BS 11000 that was going just at that moment in time, around 2013, 2014, was taking the next step into an ISO standard. And we actually joined that, the development of that standard. And I've been chairing the Swedish committee now for a little over 4 years. And we've been all around the world, in Malaysia, in New York, and in Milan, and in the UK, obviously, in Sweden. And we've negotiated and finally almost 2 years now ago, in March 2017. Oh, it's more than 2 years ago. We were able to publish that standard, and it feels good. We've been able to, back then in 2013, we identified a problem that a lot of organizations lack the tools they need to prepare themselves for collaborative working, but everyone will benefit if more people get better at partnering. So we felt we wanted to contribute to give that to the market. And we're 19 organizations in that committee today, or 18, with all the major contractors involved. Skanska's in there, we're in there. Obviously, the big clients associations are in there, like Transport Administration, and the Association for Building Clients is in there. So we feel we're getting good traction. We're just missing those suppliers, those subcontractors. Working with installations, piping, plumbing, all of those, electricity.
And really,
unfortunately, we haven't been able to get them.
It evolves, is what I've seen. It sort of evolves to now I'm hearing the general contractors, the designers, and the contractors talking about how critical the subtrades are, and that they're essential to their success. And without them, we could never be successful. But it's been an evolutionary process to get there. We had in the United States, we also sort of had a similar effort. On the West Coast, partnering has evolved. It is certainly today not what it was back in the early 90s. It has evolved and become much more sophisticated in a process. But on the East Coast, it seems as though it's similar issues as was in the study. It became too much of a, or maybe like the British, it went up as a sunshine and came down as a pancake, because it never evolved beyond a feel good kind of thing. And so it needed more process and structure to it, and evolution. So hopefully over time that will evolve over there as well, and work towards creating collaborative teams.
Well, one of my sunshine moments or one of my happy moments in facilitation actually came when we went in. We had two NCC PD, property development, and NCC construction. So it's they develop office buildings and we build them, right? So two parts of NCC. We decided to go internal partnering, believe it or not. It's difficult, but it can be done, right? And we decided to bring on the subcontractors with the major installations being piping, electricity, and ventilation. And we had more or less the same team over 2 projects that were in the same neighborhood even. And once we'd finished the first project successfully, we were all pretty happy with ourselves. We went on to build the next project. And at the startup workshop, we went away for 2 days. And we worked through the project. We're trying to get to know the client's vision with the project and what they wanted us to do. We're not in the very earliest stage, but we're still in the design phase and able to influence quite a lot. And he goes up, he takes the stage. We're about 15 people in the room, and the client goes up and he says a lot of important stuff. And he ends up with the last slide being just 3 letters on this PowerPoint presentation. It's LOA, lokal area in Swedish, which is sort of the, I just Googled it quickly here. It says the English equivalent is the main usable area in a commercial building. That's basically the floor where you could put a desk, right?
Yeah.
He said, I want as much LOA as possible. I want as much usable area as possible, and as little waste as possible, BTA, which would be the gross floor area, I guess, and the total floor area or total area of the building. So, well, he said that LOA, most important thing. And a couple of hours later, everyone's, in the bubble saying, yeah, very important, muy importante. And he comes 2 hours later, the ventilation subcontractor, he raises his hands. And this is, believe it or not, we've done a project before together. And now, it takes 2 hours. He raises his hand and he says, I know this is going to sound silly, but I can't be quiet anymore. What the is LOA? And he had no idea what LOA meant. And he's been in that industry for more than 20 years. And that was the most important key figure or key number or investment.
Target for the whole project.
Target, exactly, right? For the whole project, and had been for every project. Yeah. And he said, when we explained that to him, the main usable areas compared to the total area of the building, he said, oh, is that so important? Well, we've always talked about putting the ventilation in the floor or in the ground. What if we could put that on the roof instead, and we could use a much more different system that will require less shafts for every floor, which would give you a few square meters per floor. Would that be a good idea? And you should see the client's face. He just lit up and said, yes, that's a great idea. I love it when that happens. And that only comes from understanding each other's perspective of the pig, right? What says this pig to me?
Yes.
It's not just about building it cheap. It's about adding that value that we could never add if we came in late in the process. And just because we start talking to each other and understanding each other's what's important to each other, we're able to help. And that wouldn't have come in the first project because the client wasn't that open at that point. And we didn't really trust each other that much. So
that's what's so exciting slowly about the partnering process and tapping into the collective wisdom of the team, because there is so much know-how and capability that if we unleash it on the project, they come up with just extraordinary. Like the biggest challenges become into something that's like a jewel or something that has never been done before, but they go like, oh, well, we can do this. It's just amazing the stuff they come up with. It's just mind-boggling.
A construction worker was once asked, how do we solve this this problem where there was really no space available on the site? They said, well, we just have to cut a hole in the wall, he said jokingly. And the client heard that and said, great idea, let's do that. And I don't think that construction worker had ever been heard with any of his ideas ever before. And all of a sudden, there's a big hole in the side of the wall that they could later put a big window in, which helped everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
that was great.
I so appreciate you being here with me. And I know you and I could go on again, and we'll have to do this again so that we can check in on some other things that are going on and maybe dive in a little bit more into ISO 44001. But as we leave, sure. I always like to ask every guest to leave a gift or of a resource for everyone, all of our listeners. It could be a book, an article, podcast. What do you have something that you could share with us?
I wish I had something more up to date, but the thing that comes to mind first is Dan Pink's The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, that book he wrote ages ago. I wonder if it's 20 years ago or something. I shouldn't, well, I can't tell you about the year, but I just reread that book, and it's actually a really, really interesting book. So, have you read it?
No, I have not.
Or have you seen the clip on TED Talk? It's one of those, has got million views on it.
So
Dan Pink, Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates us, saying that incentives has a negative effect. Financial incentives will have a negative effect on tasks that requires more creative thinking. And but it's great for those boring things where you just need to stamp something very quickly, repetitive work.
We'll put a link.
If more people could just listen to that.
Yes, we'll put a link on the show notes for this. And yes, it sounds like we could have a whole talk about that. Maybe we'll do that.
Incentives don't motivate us, they concentrate us. And sometimes you just don't want people staring at one specific goal. You want them to be creative along the way as well. And that's why I try and get people to avoid the pain gain share incentives, because it doesn't motivate the people on the project.
That is awesome. So how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, anywhere. You can find me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. But what I would use most frequently would be LinkedIn. And you just search John.Thorrson and you find me there. LinkedIn.com/John.Thorrson.
And we'll put a link to that on in the show notes for this episode as well. So, John, what is your parting advice for all of us? What can we start doing tomorrow to try to help create more of a collaborative environment for our teams?
If there's anyone out there in a project or going into an alliance agreement of some sort, one of those things that I found when working through the ISO standard, ISO 44001, was in the life cycle of a relationship, you always exit at some point, right? Every relationship comes to an end. But don't wait until the end to discuss how to disengage, because you may disengage from a relationship or an alliance for many reasons, either because it was planned and the project is finished, or prematurely for any reason. And defining that up front and together while you're still talking to each other and getting to know each other actually builds a lot of trust and openness, and knowing your end game will make sure that you focus on not getting there too prematurely.
That sounds like good advice, no matter what kind of relationship you have, is to talk about a way to disengage. I certainly see that in business relationships, joint ventures, etc., that it's important to know that you have a way to disengage where you can still hopefully maintain a relationship.
When I got that epiphany, though, Sue, I went home to my wife and I told her, hey, we need an exit strategy. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. That was a very bad idea on my side.
That doesn't sound like a good idea.
That was a bad idea. So try it for business relationships. Don't bring it home.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, John, for being here. So appreciate it. And thanks for being a guest on Construction Dream Team. I know that this will be very interesting and useful to everyone who has an opportunity to listen. And so I thank you.
I'm looking forward to the next episodes, and I'll go into on iTunes and give it a 5-star rating.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, okay, this is a fantastic episode. Thank John, and everyone else can jump in on Construction Dream Team in the comments for this episode, and thank John for being with us today. And don't forget that Construction Dream Teams don't just happen. You have to build them one step at a time. And that's what we're trying to help you here on Construction Dream Team, is give you ideas, tools, solutions, so that you can build your construction dream team. And why not send out this episode to your entire team so they can help you? The more people you have helping you, the faster you can actually build your construction dream team. And don't forget to join our Construction Dream Team LinkedIn group. And we have a special webpage we created to make it easy. It's cdtlinkedin.com. That's CDT for Construction Dream Team, linkedin.com, cdtlinkedin.com. And you can just push a button and join. And also you can give us some information about yourself so we can introduce you to the group. We're going to be having events. Guests are going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking to each other so we can continue the conversations that happen on Construction Dream Team podcast. We drop every single Monday morning at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction so that you can build your construction dream team. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Sue.
I'll catch you next time.